Jesus and his disciples are plucking grain, and they're like, what are you doing? You're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to not work on the Sabbath. And Jesus is like, listen, David plucked some grain. The priest gave him bread. So if my people are hungry, they go and eat, basically, is what he said. And then he said, listen, the Sabbath was made for man, not the other way around. Hey guys, it's me, Sonja of SonjaW Coaching, and y'all, I'm so excited because this month we've been talking all about flourishment. Yes, that is a word for me. If you're on the email list, you already know the inside joke. But anyway, anyway, we've been talking all this month about flourishing and how if we follow Jeremiah 17:7-8, that we know if we're planted in his presence, in his word, and also in his purpose, that we're going to see ourselves flourish. But there are things that stop us from doing that, right? From actually getting planted, from actually really hearing from God once we're planted in his word, right? And once we're planted in his presence and his purpose. So today we're going to be talking about another thing, and that's the power of rest. All right, so let's get into it. But before I do, let me introduce myself. Hey guys, this is Sonja of SonjaW Coaching, where we help overwhelmed, multi-passionate women learn how to acknowledge, live, execute, and win their dreams. We're all about making sure that your dreams meet reality, because you are going to be living intentionally and doing this journey with me. So, all right, let's get into it. We talked about Jeremiah 17:7, where we talk about all of the things about if the man who trusts in God is blessed, and he is planted by water, his presence, and his roots go deep and they go by that stream, right? He's in his presence. When the heat comes, when the rain comes, all the things come, he is not anxious because he is planted in God, right? Well, to get planted, we gotta also do some things, right? We talked about how we gotta evaluate where we're at, how we got to we have to have accountability, right? How we gotta break bad habits. Like, there's so many different things that we can do to help ourselves flourish. And this last one is actually a really major one. And I think it's one that's super important to God. It's actually one of the commandments. He said, keep the Sabbath, right? So we're gonna break down what rest can truly do for you. Now, I can just off jump say it's a commandment, we should do it, and we should be following after God. But why would you do that, right? Like, of course, you want to follow after God, you want to love him and all of that kind of stuff, but sometimes it got to be a little bit enticing, right? I hate to say it, but sometimes we think like, okay, yes, that's a commandment of God, let me try and do it. But God has these commandments because he loves us, and he has great things for us in us following after them, right? So let me show you what I found out about rest, okay? There are 3 things that rest actually does. The first thing is that rest heals us. I could go on so many different tangents, but the one thing that popped up to in my head at first was the verse in Mark where it says, where Jesus has said that the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. And that was Mark 2, verse 27. Again, it says, the Sabbath was made for man and not man for the Sabbath. Now, I love this story, right? Because it is when Jesus claps back at the different people when they start talking mess, right? So let me put together the scenario for you, right? The disciples are through there they're walking on a Sabbath, they're plucking grain because they're hungry, right? And then somebody sees them. Now, first of all, when you think about this story, now I'm actually thinking about it as I'm retelling it to y'all, and I'm like, who is out here watching them walk through a field? Why are y'all worried about this man walking through a field? How did y'all see this if you were actually Sabbathing yourself? That's the key thing, right? On a Sabbath day, there is nothing that should be happening. Like, Nobody should be anywhere. Nobody else should be in the fields. Like, there shouldn't be anybody there. So how in the world did those people see Jesus and his disciples plucking grain? Okay, but that's not what we're talking about. So anyway, I just thought of that. So anyway, Jesus and his disciples are plucking grain, and they're like, what are you doing? You're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to not work on the Sabbath. And Jesus is like, listen, David plucked some grain. The priest gave him bread. So if my people are hungry, they gonna eat, basically, is what he said. And then he said, listen, the Sabbath was made for man, not the other way around. And when I think about that verse and I think about those words, let's break that thing down, right? Like, he says that the Sabbath was made for man. So the day of rest was made for man to rest, not for man to make a bunch of rules, right? Because that's what that second half kind of indicates, right? Man was not made for man was not made for the Sabbath. Like, man was not made to create rules and to create all these things that you must do on the Sabbath, right? The Sabbath wasn't first, man was. So anyway, I was thinking about this, and when he says that the Sabbath was made for man, I was like, wait a minute. If God says that the Sabbath was made for man, then he must have put this in place for a reason. And it got me thinking, like, God made us, so he knows what we need. Have you ever thought that he knows that we need rest? That he knows that the body that he created us in needs to rest, needs to do nothing, so that they can continue, or we can continue in doing the work that he's called us to do, to continue to live, to continue to restore. Like, he knew that the body that he placed us in on this earth, now that it is so many different things that I can go down, but the main thing is that this body does not last, right? Like, this body is falling apart until the day we die. So if God made Sabbath for the man and said that you needed to rest, it's on purpose. And then just thinking about the science behind this right now, I don't know if y'all know this, but I'm also a scientist. I'm a statistician, love the body, love healthcare, all that kind of stuff, right? And there's research out there that talks about how, one, sleep. You know how much things sleep does for us? Sleep regulates our hormones. Sleep restores our muscles. Like, one of the big things that people say who are weightlifting and all that kind of stuff, they're always talking about that sleep is important to restore your muscles after you've worked it out, right? Like, it is for literally the restoration of our bodies. It's for the regulation of our hormones and the different functions of our body. Did you know that sleep actually helps us formulate memories? Like, our brain has a chance to connect all of the dots of life when we sleep. So God was saying, I know how I created you. I know you need to rest. So that Sabbath commandment was for you. That Sabbath commandment was not for man to make Sabbath perfect. It was so that you can get the rest that you need. So, it's to heal us. The second thing it is to do is that it allows for your work to produce. Your work. I love the creation narrative, right? Like, it talks about how God, put the sun in the sky, put the earth, the water, the animals, all those things, right? And then Genesis chapter 2 verse 3 says, and this is, I don't remember what version this is, but when I read it in this version, I said, oh my gosh. It says that God rested so that what he created could produce. God didn't rest because he needed it. He rested because he knew that the things that he created needed to do its thing, needed some time to not have tinkering so that it could actually produce. Our true rest actually produces. It produces life for us. Think about it. Have you ever like put together a whole plan, right? Or for something, and then you put it away and then you come back to it. What happens? You're able to refine it, right? You have a couple more ideas for it. You're able to build it out a little bit more, right? Like, this is what rest does for you. Rest actually allows you to produce creativity. Just thinking about it, we are made in the image of God. So if God himself, the one that don't need to rest, took a moment so that the things that he created could produce, how much more so should we do that for the things that we create, right? So I find that so crazy to me. Like, and then even thinking about Jesus himself, he followed this. Whenever there was a major miracle, he rested. Like, every single time he took a minute to rest. When he fed the 5,000, he went off into the wilderness to rest. When he did, I forgot, there was something else that he did. Lots of things he did. But you will see over and over again that there was this balance between doing something and resting. Doing something and resting. Doing something and going to God in rest, right? And I think if Jesus himself in his mortal body saw the importance, then we got to do the same. And I was just thinking even more about this, right? Like, and what that rest actually looks like. And I'm learning more and more what this Sabbath rest should look like. It shouldn't just be you vegging out and doing nothing, but it's your time to be in God's presence. I think about, so one thing that I'm really serious about is that I try really hard to make sure that I have like a day where I do get to rest. I may do some things. I may go hang out with family. I may do like different things or whatever. But the primary thing is that I'm not doing work. Okay? And I noticed that some of those days when I actually spend some time in his presence, I actually feel more renewed than in those times where I literally just veg out and watch TV all day. I pointed over here because my TV in my living room is here. But seriously, I noticed the difference. So I think that could be a whole nother tangent I go on. What does actual rest look like? But we're not doing that today because we're talking about the 3 things that rest does, the real quick 3 things. And then the final thing that rest does is that it brings blessing. There's so many verses where it talks about how if you Sabbath, then this will happen. If you Sabbath, then this will happen. And I love what he says in Jeremiah 17:24 and 25. It says, "But if you listen to me, declares the Lord, and bring in no burden by the gates of this city on the Sabbath day, but keep the Sabbath holy and do not work on it, then there shall enter by the gates of this city kings and princes who will sit on the throne of David." So basically saying that you will have a long lineage in that village, in that state. Like, you will be able to prosper long, right? Because that essentially is saying that whenever there's turbulence or anything like that, there's fighting, then there's always a new king, right? Some king rises up and kills somebody else and does the thing, right? But what this is saying is that you will sit on the throne. There will be continual kings and princes coming that are on the same that are from the same family, meaning that there's going to be stability in the land. Then it says, riding in chariots and on horses, and they and their officials, the men of Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem. And this city shall be inhabited forever. So if you know kind of like the story of Jeremiah in general, there is this, it talks about how the people of Israel disobeyed God, and this prophecy is basically saying because you disobey God, you're going to go out into exile. But if you don't disobey God, you won't. This is part of if you don't disobey God, you won't. And this is where God is like laying out, hey, if you keep my Sabbath, then this is the good that's going to happen. You're going to have stability in your land. You're not going to be taken out into exile, into slavery. You won't be a slave to all the things of this world, right? If you follow after the Sabbath and you do all the things that you agreed to when you made it a covenant with him, because Israel actually made a covenant with God saying we will do these things, and we understand that if we don't, this is what's going to happen, right? And Jeremiah is talking about how the Israelites disobeyed that. That is really like a really cool metaphor for our own life. Like, if you know Jesus, if that's who you profess to follow, right, you made a covenant with him, and when you make that covenant, you are guaranteeing that you will be well. Bad things will happen, but you will be well, right? And when we disobey that covenant, then we're open to all the things that could happen without God's protection, right? So that's a whole, I could talk about this all day. Like, I truly find or believe that there's so much in rest. Just even thinking about my own life, like, I am very serious about taking time to rest, but sometimes I forget that, or I don't realize how tired I am, right? I always do my little quarterly retreats, I have vacation, but this time around, I didn't do a typical like summer vacation, and work was really intense. So I finally took some time off in September, and y'all, when I got off and I rested, I literally laid in bed for like a couple of days. It was crazy. But then after I think I took like a week and a half. When I got back to work, I was literally on fire. Like, things were able to move quickly. I was able to think quickly. Like, it literally started me back up again. And I realized then that I gotta be even more serious about my rest, right? I gotta make sure I'm Sabbathing, but I also gotta make sure that I'm making other arrangements for rest. And I encourage you to do the same thing. Take some time to rest yourself, rest your body, because when you rest, it will heal you. When you rest, your work will produce for you. And when you rest, it will bring a blessing. It will bring a blessing of stability. It will bring a blessing of overflow. It will bring all of the things that you're looking for, but you gotta rest, okay? So anyway, if this was good for you, if you liked it, go ahead and subscribe, because I come here every single Thursday to tell you something good, okay? Anyway, I hope that you have an awesome day wherever you are.